My studio, it's time for us to sit down with a couple of very important people. I mean that because we have some very important issues to talk about. And we have City Administrator Sally Burbridge. Sally, welcome.
Good morning.
Good
Thank
morning.
You, Stan.
Glad to have you here. And Alderman Shawn Bolerjack. Hey, buddy.
Hey, good morning.
How are you?
Good. How about yourself?
Fine. Did you get done running this morning? Get some coffee in, and you're ready to hear, right?
I'm ready. Ready to go.
All right. Very good. Well, we're here to kind of give people the opportunity to hear about the sales tax. That's very important for the city, and also the sewer bond issue. And these are two totally separate things that the city is requesting for two totally separate reasons.
Yes.
One is required. It's going to be required by our wonderful EPA/2DNR to the city. You know, it's like a little pass me down. You
Yes.
just steer it on the bottom, so you make it happen. We don't care how, but you make it
Right.
happen. But we're going to prove everything you do to make it happen,
Right.
so we're going to make it go up in price,
Yes.
which they do very well.
Yes.
And then the other one is basically to take the pressure off the city and trying to provide all the services that they have.
Correct.
Because as we all know, if anybody's been out, gone to the grocery store, gone out and tried to
Yes.
buy a car, gone out and tried to buy a lawnmower, anything else,
Yes.
you notice that the prices have gone
They
up.
have. They have.
And services have gone up, and everything has gone up. So, in the same time as all that, the incomes sometimes, even though our sales tax is up, is not enough to to offset that rise
Right.
in prices,
Right.
correct?
Correct.
So, which one we want to talk about first?
You want to talk about the sewer bonds since that's the
We
first
can.
question?
We can.
All right, let's talk
So-
about the sewer bond. Okay, so we have an option here. We don't have to pass this, or
Right.
we can't.
Right.
Either way, something's going to have to happen, right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And that's the bad news. You know, we were just talking about how prices for everything have gone up, and here's the thing. So, I've heard out in the public, well, how can the city raise the prices on any of this stuff? Because we're all hurting. We are. Like you mentioned, even the cost for the city to provide services has gone up. And sometimes we don't have a choice. And this is that one that you alluded to that comes from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, as a mandate that we have to do some upgrades to our sewer treatment facility. So, why? Well, there have been some changes in the regulations on things that can be released from our treatment plant into Spring Creek, and Spring Creek has been identified as a
Submersive creek.
submersive
Which
creek.
is, you have to be, and I read this back, was it 2011 when they did this the first time?
Yeah, 2010, 2011.
If you laid
yeah.
in the creek and it covered your entire body, it was a submersive creek. And I said, did you come after a rainstorm
Right.
or what?
Right.
Because parts of the creek,
Are
it's
dry.
not.
Right.
You
Right.
got a little trickle through there, but it's not.
Right.
And when they did, I said, or did you go down to a certain area where it's a collective part, like
Right.
down by Schwartz's, and it all goes
Right.
into that little collecting pond right there and then trickles down.
Right.
Well, if you went in there, yeah, it is submersible, but that's not the creek. The creek
Right.
flows after that.
Yes.
Anyway, but nonetheless,
Right.
that's where it became a submersive creek, and then they redefined that. Was it 2020 or 2019, right before COVID? Did they redefine it?
No, the most recent came out just this last year.
Okay, maybe that's what I'm
So
thinking
yeah,
of.
so
Okay.
April, so almost
Yeah.
a year ago.
So-
yeah,
Which redefined it even more.
yes, exactly.
And it still did not become out of the submersive,
Right.
which would have changed what the city had to do.
Correct. Correct.
And I think back in 2011, I think the city even appealed to DNR on this,
Gotcha.
and they continued
That makes
this.
sense.
They said no, that's
No, we're not given. No.
yeah, we're not going to give in.
Right.
And at that time, Shawn, you might remember the old reed beds.
Yes.
We had to get rid of our reed beds, and our reed beds were working great. That's long before
We still
SB
have reed beds.
Well, I know, but I meant
Okay.
not to the extent we
Oh,
did.
okay.
That was
Okay.
the only thing we had.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
so
Right.
we had to suddenly, okay, we got to change this.
Change how we're doing. Yep.
And we have to do this. We have to make sure that the outflow going into Spring Creek is pretty
Right.
much cleaner than
Then-
distilled water.
Yes, pretty much.
But it
Yes.
can't be distilled water because that will kill aqua
Right.
life down the way.
Right. We still have to have dissolved oxygen in there. We still
Yeah.
have to have all those other nutrients in it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that
but it
cr-
has to be exactly the right cocktail mix of nutrients.
Right. But
Yes.
Sally, they keep changing that
They
mix.
do. They do. And it's not just here in Salem.
No,
this
no,
is,
no.
This
This is statewide.
Yeah, well, it's nationwide. I mean,
Well,
yeah.
and for Missouri, DNR enforces it.
Right, correct.
But the EPA, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we think ours is bad. California's even worse.
Right. Yeah. Some states have far stricter regulations, and so.
But
But
the idea
unfortunate
is-
news, right,
yes.
for us is that here in Salem, they have now dictated that we have to meet these new standards that they developed and released April of last year for what we put into Spring Creek after the water's all been treated. It's as clean as drinking water. So we meet those standards, but now we've got to meet even more strict standards. So
Can they measure this yet? Because I know back in 2011 when they set the standards, they couldn't measure it yet. Now, I think they finally got to that point that they could.
Gotcha.
But
That's still debatable.
Okay.
That depends on who you talk to on whether they can measure it or not.
Okay.
So, but yeah, and again, that's not unheard of for EPA to say you have to meet this standard. Well, we can't even measure for that standard at our facility. Well, it doesn't matter. This is what you have to do. So it's, there are those parameters. And then there's also the whole concept of the kind of the unfunded mandate. We used to hear about that a lot. And that's really what this is. This is a mandate. We don't have a choice. We must do it. And so as we kind of go down that path now of how do we do this, this brings us to that question on the ballot, this first question, which is about a sewer bond. So what is it? What is a sewer bond? So this is kind of new in recent history for the city to do a bond. And
last sewer bond they had was in the 90s.
no, okay, then yes, it's been a bit.
Yeah.
Yes. So a general revenue bond, which is what we're talking about, or maybe not a general revenue, but a revenue bond. To keep that word out of there, general. It's revenue bond.
That can get
for the
confusing.
sewer. Yes, it can get confusing. For the sewer plant. Is it's an alternative way of financing. So we're all familiar with, we go down to the bank and we can finance our car or our home, okay? And you get different terms, different interest rates, depending on what's happening in even the global market. Those interest rates can be different. If I buy a house today, my interest rate will be one thing. If I buy it this time next year, it'll be something different. So
I think a lot of people have seen that lately with
Yes.
the increase in
yes.
interest rates. And we'll talk a little bit about that, how that would affect
Yes.
what would happen if this does not pass.
Yes. So the question on a bond is, basically, do the citizens want to pass a bond as a way to help pay for these upgrades? But to backtrack just a little bit, before we even get to the bond and the amount that we need to finance, I think an important piece to this whole story is that this past July, so we're talking 9 months ago, the city applied for and successfully, we were awarded a grant for $5 million through DNR, and so that's the Department of Natural Resources. This is ARPA funds. There's federal funds that are flowing down through the state to help communities with these type of improvements that they have to make. So we were approved $5 million.
For the sewer. We
For
got
the
approved for
sewer
more
plant.
than that, but for the sewer,
Correct,
it was $5 million.
just for the sewer plant, $5 million. So we do have that, and very grateful that we were awarded that. That is a huge help. Especially when we start talking about the total price tag. We haven't mentioned that yet this morning.
Well, let's also qualify that the alderman had to raise sewer rates
Correct.
in order to get the $5 million,
Right.
and I know people were upset about
They were,
that.
yes.
But it was a point system.
Yes.
And when and people can go look at where Salem ranked in this, and
Yes.
it wasn't like it was the top one or two.
No.
Yeah, they got the money, but they weren't
But-
that far from not getting the money.
Correct.
And it was a very competitive grant.
yeah. Yes.
It
Yeah, it
only
was
awarded
over 1,000 different applications were received, not just for sewer,
Right.
Correct.
but over 1,000 applications
yeah.
received for all the different grants.
Right.
That's a lot of money,
Yeah.
and that's a lot of interest in trying to get this
Right.
money.
Yeah,
Well,
and
and-
over 300 cities had applied just for the sewer grant
Right.
alone, and only 25 cities was going to be awarded that
Right. So very
$5 million
competitive.
grant.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, when the alderman did raise the sewer rates,
Right.
that was an addition. I think it was 5 points, and I think that
yeah.
3 or 5
Somewhere
points.
in
I
that-
can't
yeah.
remember, but that 3 or 5 points was needed.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
And in case someone's wondering, well, when did this happen? Those were the sewer rates that went into effect on the December bill. So, so yes, and I know there were folks who were very upset. I mean, nobody likes to make that decision. We've got to increase rates. It stinks to have to be in that position.
Talking about sewer, and it stinks.
Yes, pun intended, right?
Yeah, no pun intended.
But At the same time, like you mentioned, it made us more competitive because that was one of the criteria for this grant is that your sewer rates had to be at least 2% of the average median income, household median income for your community. So we were well below that.
Right.
And so we had to increase them to make it more competitive, and it paid off. I realize the average citizen probably doesn't see that yet, but it pays off in that we won't have to pay back this $5 million. And so that's a huge chunk of money that, like I said, we're very fortunate to have received.
We would have to have been borrowing that as well.
Yes,
or
that on
having
top
that as
of.
part. Yeah.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
yes, yeah.
Okay. So now that we got the $5 million, because we raised rates already to make it competitive,
Right.
now move forward. I didn't mean to interrupt
No,
you,
no,
but I
you're
thought
fine.
we needed to lay the groundwork because people
Absolutely.
say, well, we just raised rates. Why do we do that?
Right, right.
We did that to get that grant.
Right, right. Which actually keeps rates lower
And
than they
we'll
would have
save,
otherwise
and-
been.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's hard to see that,
It
but it will
is.
save you money in the long run.
Correct. So the total, and we haven't mentioned this yet, the total cost of these upgrades mandated by the EPA is about $9.5 million. And so, for most folks, even for me, I look at my personal finances, and that's like an astronomical number. Most folks glass over when you start talking millions of dollars. It's just not something we'll see in our lifetime. Do you know what I mean? On a personal scale.
Sure.
But $9.5 million, we were fortunate enough because we put in the work and did the hard decisions to raise the rates and be competitive that we got the $5 million grant. So that cuts it by over half, the cost of this plant. So getting back to the bond, what we're asking the citizens is to approve a bond for $4.6 million, which is roughly the remaining balance to do these upgrades. So the question is, do we want to approve a bond to do the financing, or do we not want to do a bond? And there are consequences both ways. That's probably the best
Sure.
way to put it. And so just to kind of lay it out, $4.6 million. There are a couple of other things that happen if the bond is approved by voters.
So
Go
if
ahead.
you vote yes and approve the bond, this could happen.
Correct.
Okay.
So what could happen if you vote yes is that then the city's eligible to apply for an additional grant, which is kind of tied to the bond. So there's an additional $2 million grant that we're only eligible for if the bond passes.
If the bond passes.
So if the bond doesn't pass, we don't even get to apply. That's
Lost money.
exactly lost money. And now I've heard out in the public, oh, well, there's no guarantee we'll get the grants. You're right. There's no guarantee. But if we don't approve it, then it's guaranteed we won't get them. That's the guarantee.
Well,
Is that if we don't approve a
yeah,
bond, we won't
you
get
can't
the
win the lottery if you don't play.
Correct. So, and then there are some other grants that we intend to apply for. One we've identified specifically already. Another $750,000. We're going to continue looking at other options to help whittle down this $4.6 million. Right now, with the $2 million grant, the $750,000 grant, which is through the State Economic Development
Is
Department.
that like a revolving loan fund? It's got a reduced rate, or is that a true grant?
Which one?
The 750.
It's a true grant.
Okay.
It's a true grant, yeah.
Okay, because I know
So-
that I saw something where they're releasing funds to a revolving loan fund
Right.
as well at a reduced,
Right.
very low interest rate
Yeah.
to help.
Right.
Yeah, and I believe
some of
that
these.
$2 million grant that's tied into the bond, that's part of the state revolving fund.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So all these different pots of money that we're trying to cobble together to
Hey,
pay the bill.
If they contribute a little bit,
That's right.
It's
Every
less
piece
than
of
we
it-
have to pay.
Exactly. Every piece of it reduces that. So if we're successful, like I said, if the bond passes, like you mentioned, then we can apply for the $2 million grant. And if that's successful, we will be applying also for the $750,000 grant. If that one's successful, we could reduce the amount of the bond when it closes. It's kind of like a loan. When it closes, down to $1.8 million. So from 9.5 down to 1.8 million. And so right there, if we had to pass on that entire 9.5 million in rates to customers, I can't even imagine. I remember hearing Alderman Bolerjack had shared something sometime back with another community who was talking about sewer rates being on par with cell phone bills. And that's kind of what comes to mind if we had to finance that entire 9.5 million. That's a really scary concept. So if we can reduce it down to 1.8, sorry, 1.8 million.
Don't, not
Yeah,
8.1.
no, 8.
Not
no,
8.1.
1.8 million.
Yes.
Then, and again, this is all kind of estimates because we don't know what those interest rates will be. We don't know what
There'll be
closing
some
costs.
fees associated with it,
Exactly.
you know.
But we're estimating that then to pay it back, we will have to pass it on into rates to our citizens. But we're estimating somewhere in the ballpark of $3 to $6 a month per household. And so that I get, there'll be folks, oh my gosh, again, another increase. I understand that. Again, we don't have a lot of choice,
Okay.
and we're
So,
applying for every grant we can.
But $3 or $6 a month.
Correct.
Now, that is with all this passing.
Correct.
And the bonds. And the grants
Right.
that are coming, the $2 million grant,
Correct.
and the other $750,000 grant.
So before we go there, though, I do want to make one statement.
Sure.
So what happens if we don't get these other two grants?
Well, that's that was coming next.
Okay.
Okay.
I thought you were going somewhere else.
No, so 3 to 6.
Correct.
Now, so if you're staying at home, it's like a scoreboard or scorecard.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if the bond passes and the grants are received,
Right.
it could be $3 to $6 a month.
Right.
All right. So let's just say we do pass the bond issue.
Mm-hmm.
We have the $5 million that's already in our pocket.
Correct.
Okay, we don't have it, but we
Right.
will get it.
Right.
And so now let's talk about that. So we don't get
Right.
the other grants.
Right.
If we don't get any other funding, we would still be on the hook for
$4.6 million.
dollars. And where does that go?
So if it passes and we don't get the extra grants, then we're still looking at lower rates, and I don't have those calculations, so my apologies for that, but we're still looking at lower rates than if the bond doesn't pass, because the financing mechanism, the bond, is at lower interest rates and better deals for local governments than traditional financing. So if the bond passes, we still get to take advantage of those lower interest rates,
Right.
which means cost to average citizen will still be lower than if it doesn't pass.
Right.
And that lower interest rate can be up to 70% lower than the current market
Right.
interest rates.
Right.
Right.
It is a municipal bond, so
Yes.
people who invest in this would get
Yes.
it's tax-free money
Right.
when the city pays back the bond.
Correct.
Now, that's for the investors on the other side. That's
Right.
not exactly for the people who are having to
Right.
pay the sewer bill. They're thinking,
Right.
my gosh, this is crazy. But yes, because it is a municipal bond, there
Right.
is a lower tax,
Right.
lower interest rate than
Correct.
it would be if you had to go to a bank and
Correct.
finance it. So if the bond issue does not pass, and this is, well, the worst scenario, but let's just go back to the other one. $3 to $6 if we get all the grants.
Mm-hmm.
If we get the lower interest rate, what are we kind of feeling it might be?
I don't have those
like
calculations.
about $8 to $10, maybe a little bit more.
I don't know. I haven't
Okay,
run
all
those
right,
numbers.
all right.
And I
Well,
hate to
we
put
won't
something
know
out there.
because the interest rate changes
right,
daily.
Right. We won't know what that is till we close. Yeah. So
But it will be more than $3 to $6.
it will, but it will be less than the other alternative.
Okay, so the other alternative is
If the bond fails.
ooh,
Yes, I know. It's scary, scary, scary. So if the bond were not to pass, okay, then we have the 4.6 million, the full amount. The chances for grants kind of reduce at that point. We certainly don't get the $2 million grant.
Right.
We don't get to apply for it even. If we have to finance the full 4.6 million without the bond, then we're looking at payments, or not payments, but cost to the average household of being $13 to $15 a month additional. And
or
that's
more if they
painful.
keep raising rates.
Well,
I mean, it's a possibility.
interest rates, yes.
or the
yes.
interest rates that keep going
Yes.
up.
Yeah.
If they continue.
Again, these are, best
because
guesses.
we don't have
Yeah.
that
No,
loan
we don't.
yet, so you
Right.
still have to apply.
Right.
You
Right.
know, and yes, you are a municipality. You might get a little bit better rate, but
But
you're
right.
hoping.
Right. We're hoping. We don't, there's no guarantee on that one other than it'll be way more expensive.
It will
That's
be
the
more
guarantee.
expensive.
Which is really scary.
So basically, and we might get the $2 million and not get the seven.
Right. Right. It
750.
could be anywhere in between
Or-
all those numbers.
Right,
Right.
and we might, if we apply for the $2 million and don't get it, can we still get the 750?
We can still apply for the 750.
all right,
Yes.
so-
And we are looking at other opportunities to apply for grants.
Sure,
So,
I'm sure
that's-
we're scouring the books. No doubt about that. Any opportunity that's out there,
Right.
and if that does come up and the city can get the money,
Right.
absolutely, they want to keep the sewer rates as
Yes.
reasonable as possible. But
Right.
again, let's backtrack. This is not optional.
Right.
You're going to get an increase, and this is not because anything the city did.
Right.
It's not anything that anybody in this county did.
Right.
It all comes from the federal government and their requirements through EPA demanded on DNR to make this happen to the city of Salem.
Right.
And there's nothing the city could have done differently in the
Right.
last 50 years that would have changed this.
Right. Right.
This all started really coming up right after 9/11. It really started coming up with
Gotcha.
much more of these
Right. More stringent.
these requirements that were not even able to be detected. We want this stringent. We went through that time that everything had to be absolutely clean air, clean water,
Right.
clean everything. Well,
And we all want clean air and clean water.
Absolutely.
That's not a question.
But
It's just how do we achieve it and to what degree?
yeah,
What degree is realistic?
and the technology to get clean
Right.
burning, coal plants that were burning,
Correct.
they're not letting out steam.
Yes.
That didn't stop them from shutting them down. And I kept trying to figure out. We went through all this clean coal technology, spent trillions of
Yes.
dollars, and we've got it now. We've got a bunch of coal in the ground we don't use because we've shut it all down.
Yeah.
Yet we're burning natural gas and putting the same carbon monoxide in the air that they were doing with the coal plants. Does it make a lot of sense? No, I don't think so.
No.
But it all depends on who you talk to.
That's right.
And that's so anyway. But the situation, that's not the problem we have here. Our problem is the discharge from our wastewater treatment facility.
Correct.
And it must meet
Right.
these requirements. Now, DNR will play ball with the
Right.
city.
Absolutely.
They do
Yeah.
a good job. And I will say they're impatiently patient. Is that
Right.
probably a pretty
Yes.
good term?
Yes.
As long as you're moving forward,
Right, as
they're
long as you
kind
show
of
progress.
right.
Yeah.
They're on your side. But as
Yes.
soon as you would just say like,
We're not
you know
doing
what,
it.
we're not going to do it, and then what
Then
do you
you're in
do? Then
trouble.
you start paying fines.
That's right. And that's, that question has come up. So what if we just don't do this? Well, at a certain point, we'll be, beyond like any permit, any kind of approved plan, and then they'll start fining us. And those fines could easily outstrip the cost of the improvements to the wastewater treatment plant. And so it's just not, it's not an option.
Well, and then the fines still have to be paid, and you still have to get the improvements done.
Right. Yeah. Then you've got a double. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or you just kind
Yeah.
of fold the whole city up, I guess, and
Well,
then because you can't flush
right.
the toilet.
Right. Yeah. That's a,
You
yeah.
know, I mean, in all honesty, I mean, you're in a no-win situation.
Yes.
But you want to kind of keep the pain down.
Right. As much as possible. Yes. And yeah.
So your options again, and let's just clarify this. Let's make it easy. If you pass the sewer bond issue, and the city can get the $2 million grant,
Right.
and they can get the additional $750,000, and not to say they won't get more,
Right.
somewhere down the road, you could pay $3 to $6 a month additional in sewer costs, okay, on your sewer bill. If you pass the sewer bond issue and they can't get the grants, but you're going to be able to get financing at a lower rate because the bond issue did pass.
Right.
That rate's reduced. We'll say $6 to $8, maybe $10, $8,
Sure.
maybe $9 at most.
We'll call it a very wild guess.
Yeah,
How's
but-
that? Very wild.
I would say between 6 and 10 right now because you don't know what the interest rate's
Right.
going to be.
Right,
We
we
just
don't.
don't. If you have to try and finance this through regular sources, you're looking probably, I would almost venture to say near $18. And somewhere in that vicinity, 15 to 20, it could be. So
Yeah.
your choices are kind of clear. If you're a city resident, what do you want? You're going to be paying more.
Right.
What would you like to pay more?
Right.
15 to 20, 6 to 8,
Right.
3 to 6.
Right. What range would you rather be in? Yes.
Yeah, this is not optional. It's going to happen.
Right.
And as long as you're a city resident or you're a business in the city, now it's not easy to just pick up and go outside the city limits and say, well, we're not going to do this.
Right. Right.
Well, I hate to tell you that the city is going through this. Go try and put in a septic system if you're a commercial business. You think what the
Right.
city's paying is a lot of money?
Yeah. And that's
You're going to be surprised.
yeah, that's the alternative. I hear all the time, well, I'm going to move out of the city. Oh, well, okay, but then you're footing the entire bill for your system, whatever that is, yourself. And so, I mean, there are trade-offs there.
Right.
So,
and a lot of
yeah.
people say, well, I'll go put a pond out there. No, you can't do that anymore
Right,
either.
right.
So,
Yeah, years ago, but not now.
years ago.
Right.
Years ago, you could put that discharge pond and put it 300 yards down, and no
Right.
matter how close it was or far away, you still knew it was there.
Yes. Yes.
There's just nothing you can do about that. But again, you have to understand the requirements for the cities going under are not placed by the alderman.
No.
This is not anything they have done.
No.
This is federally regulated, passed
Right.
through DNR
Right.
to the city.
Right.
And then they say, here, city,
Right, do
you
this.
figure it out.
Yes.
City hires an engineering firm. They come
Correct.
in and they put a plan together that they submit to DNR to see if
Right.
DNR says yes, or DNR may say no.
Right.
Find a different plan.
Right.
I mean, really, it's not
Yes.
just cut and dry.
No, it's not. It's a lot of back and forth, a lot of negotiation to try to find, what exactly works and what's acceptable. So, yes, it is a lot of work.
A lot of work. And there's costs that are associated with
Absolutely.
that, too.
Right.
So if you have an engineering firm put a whole plan together and it doesn't fit, you're still going to have to pay them for
Right.
that plan because they didn't
Right.
know DNR is going to turn it away
Right.
and say
And
no.
it's not just a new plan either. That's the
No.
thing. You gotta create the plan that strikes that fine line between here's what we have as an existing facility. How do we tweak it, modify it, do it to meet these new regs? So it's not like we're building brand new construction, and it could be very clear. Oh, well, this type of treatment will address all your issues. No, we got to take what we have, modify it, work with it, then submit the plan to DNR, and work with them to come up with a plan that they're on board
They're
with.
happy with.
Yes.
And here's the scary part, Sally, and I think all of us should know this. This could all change again in 10 years or
It
5
could.
years.
It could. It could. Yeah, we
know,
really don't have any say in it.
And it
Yeah.
just doesn't, you just
Right.
can't win.
No. And you alluded to it earlier. This isn't because of something the city's done wrong or messed up. This is just as we continue on a nationwide scale, moving toward cleaner and cleaner and cleaner, and that's the push. And again, like I said earlier, we all want clean water and clean air, and we all want that. But where's the fine line? Where's where we can still live, where we can still afford to have our sewer service, and we have clean water?
Yeah,
So
because a
that's-
lot of rural residents are finding
Yes.
Septic systems, and it's very interesting to replace a septic system. I don't know if anybody's out there and tried those state rules. Have you read those?
I
They're
no, not here.
So to put a new septic system in, you have to put the new septic system in, and they have to test it for 6 months.
Oh wow.
Now, how do you test it when it's a new house? They actually have to run stuff through there to test it. And I'm thinking, seriously,
Wow.
this is the craziest stuff I've ever heard in my life. Now, I think they reduced that, pulled that back, but that was the
Gotcha.
original one they came out with. And I said, are you guys even serious?
Right.
Because that's crazy.
Yeah.
You know?
And in 6 months, a septic system, if you have a tank, a holding tank, it's not, this is getting a little more
Yeah,
into depth on, septic systems, but it's not developed the bacteria, what they call the bugs and
Right.
everything to be processing correctly yet in 6 months.
So
yeah.
So it's not really functioning
Right.
properly yet. Now, if
Right.
you're going into an old one,
Right.
yeah, I mean, you can kind of test that system.
Right.
If you're buying an existing one, if you want to build something new out of town, it's really not as easy as you
Right.
think anymore. Plus, first off, and then nowadays you have to have the geological service come over and test to see if your ground's too aerated. Because your septic system has to be in an area that doesn't seep into the water table.
Right. Yes.
Holy cow! So
Yes.
I'm gonna put my septic system over there. No, you're
No,
not.
you can't. Right.
You know,
That's
well,
too
it's
porous over
downwind.
there.
I know
Right.
it, but it's not going there.
Right.
You know, because it's too porous.
Right.
If the ground's too porous, even though it
Right.
goes through the septic system, it comes out
Right.
in a more favorable
Right.
distribution. It's still not going to comply with the Department of Natural Resources. There's just a lot of tweaking. I
There is.
appreciate the people that do this because it's way above my head. And I've kind of, when I got out of real estate, one of the reasons why was this, because I said, I cannot believe what they're making people want to build on the back 40, what
Right.
you got to do
Right. The
to
hoops
go
you have to
survive.
jump
You
through.
drill your well, you go, okay, well, I can go drill my well and put my septic in and do
Right.
this stuff. No.
Yeah. It's become a very technical field.
It is.
Yes.
And
So-
so to hook into a system, and I know there was a lot of talk, Public Water Supply District number 1, I don't remember, Shawn, you remember this, but because you weren't here, they
Right.
actually put out on a ballot if people wanted to have a sewer system,
Right.
of them to investigate putting
Right.
in a sewer system because this very issue
Right.
Sure.
is going to come up.
Yeah.
And sooner or later, it will come up.
Absolutely.
No doubt about it. So we have basically not many options.
Right.
We have basically 3. Pass the bond issue, and hopefully we get the $2 million grant, $750,000 grant, and we pay little, $3 to $6. pass the bond issue, can't get the grants, but we can get better interest rates on the financing and pay a little bit more. And then the worst scenario is it doesn't pass and you finance it. And I won't say a commercial rate. You'll get a little bit better rate, but it's going to be, anybody that's going out and trying to buy a house right now, what is it, 7%?
I'm not even sure. I'm not in the market right now, so
I'm thinking
sure.
7. I think I just saw something for 7% after this last little raise they had. 7%. 2 years ago, that was 2.
That's right.
2.3.
Yeah.
7%. You don't hear Golden Mortgage out there anymore offering that 2.35, do you?
No.
You know, you watch Cardinal baseball. Remember the Golden Mortgage in Westport offering 2.38?
Yeah.
You're not going to see that for a while.
Right.
You know, and it's just not there.
Right.
So, again, you're fighting for the money. Now, here's the thing, that the only other thing that is available now is because there are less mortgages being put out there because nobody's buying houses now.
Right.
That there is more money
More funds
in
available.
the market now to loan people money.
Gotcha.
More money, I guess I should say, not more loans, but more higher amounts of dollars that can do that. But again, think about it. Make your decision. Just ask to vote on April the 4th, or you can vote now. Remember, no excuse absentee voting is going on now, and you can vote on this right now.
Yeah. One thing before we kind of switch topics,
Sure.
I do need to mention, when you go to vote, the ballot language is very confusing. Okay. So
When isn't it?
right. As most ballot language is. And so it has language in there that talks about purchasing additional property. It talks about right of ways. It like I said, it makes you kind of think that, oh, are they buying new ground to put this on? We're not. That's not the intent. The intent is all of the upgrades for the sewer treatment plant will be on the current property the city already owns for that. The reason it's worded that way, this is a big if, okay? We all, we've talked quite a bit already this morning about, prices of everything has gone up, and anybody who's tried to do any type of project or construction, those costs are ridiculously higher than what we're used to seeing in years past, or at least maybe not the last year or so, but anyway, but if we should be fortunate enough that we do the work, the upgrades on the treatment plant, and we have funds left over, okay? Like I said, we're not really anticipating that, but if it should happen, then that language gives us a little bit of leeway. One of the issues that we've not talked about, because it's not what's driving the biggest part of the upgrades, but another issue we have with the treatment plant is that every time we have a storm event, like this last weekend, it floods our treatment plant. And so even if we have all of our, I don't want to say contaminants, but all of our bugs, all of our nutrients are at the right levels, as soon as all that stormwater hits, it throws everything out of kilter. And so then we're kind of like rebuilding, trying to get it back. Yeah. Well, because all that stormwater hitting, so part of the issue, we have manholes, we have old lines, houses before, I think I heard, I haven't gone and looked it up specifically, but sometime before the mid-50s, you could connect your storm gutters on your house.
It was after the mid-50s.
It was after that before we changed it. But the houses built, prior had all that stuff that connected straight into the sewer system. So we have all this stormwater coming in. Now, houses built today, that's not allowed. You can't connect your rain gutters, your stormwater, and none of that goes into the sewer system. But all that comes in now in floods. So if there is any funds left over, if we're that fortunate, then we could go to our lines and our manholes that allow that excess water coming in and do some work on those, which would also help the wastewater treatment plant. That's why we would be able to do that, is because it would help impact what's going on at the treatment plant.
Because if you only say what you're going to do on the ballot just
for
that is it.
Yes.
It's called an encumbered issue, and right now you have flexibility with the wording it is.
Yes.
So the wording on the ballot is a little bit open, only because if you do, like you said, it's a $4.6 million issue.
Right.
If you do get the grants and you are able to take this stuff to keep that runoff water and to keep storm water from entering, and we know infiltration is a huge problem in Salem. It's been a problem for years. It's a problem for any older city. It just is, because all those old requirements, which weren't there, you have now, that weren't there. And the city didn't really have any codes until the 70s.
Right.
Most of those, and I know when I came into town for the first time and looked for houses, and I looked at the storm drain outside, and I
Right.
could smell
Right.
out of that
Yes.
storm drain. And I'm thinking, wait a minute.
Right.
This
Yes.
should be a runoff drain. And
it wasn't.
It wasn't.
Right.
It tied right in
Right.
to the storm drain. And
Right.
that was outside the garage. That's
Right.
outside water. I'm thinking,
Yeah.
whoa, no.
Yeah.
But coming from an area that had all the codes in place for years,
Right.
knowing that
You
couldn't
didn't see that.
happen,
Yes.
I had never seen that. And then when
Right.
I got to talk to my dad about it, he said, there's a lot of that in old St. Louis,
Yes.
too, that runs into the system because
Right.
all those houses with all those storm sewers in front of their houses, they all went right into the sanitation.
Yeah. Yeah, there wasn't a separate storm drain.
Yeah.
Right.
So then they had to go and they started digging them all up and thought, oh my God,
Yeah.
how expensive is that? When they had to change the pipes.
Yes.
Actually, they had to put the sanitation line lower,
Yes.
stormwater higher, and then the stormwater would run off and go into the Mississippi River. Well,
Right.
then guess where the wastewater treatment plant is in St. Louis? Right on the Mississippi. And so, of course, it floods and
Right.
it's all in there anyway.
Right. But
But-
but that's why
right.
that seems vague, that language.
Yes.
And so, keep that in mind. We're not buying new property. That's not the intent, but it's to allow us a little bit of wiggle room and a little flexibility should we have funds left over to address some of the other issues that contribute to
And
what's going on.
we do have an old
We
infrastructure
do.
system in
We do.
Salem, and that's been noted. I think anybody that's been to a Board of Alderman meeting
Right.
or has read it in the newspaper or heard it on radio or KSMO, Mark Nash will come and tell us, we got this antiquated electric system or antiquated water system. There's still lead pipes in some
Right.
of our systems.
Yes.
And one of those grants that we got was
Yes.
to actually
Yes.
identify those.
Yes.
So I hope people understand that there's a lot more to it. When it was all put in, it was great. Everybody
Right.
was happy about
That's
it.
right.
It was all brand new. But 60 years down the road,
Yes.
nobody thought what would happen 60 years down the road. Clay pipes
Right.
were wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful. They look great. But they break.
Yes. Yes.
And they break under pressure. And unfortunately, you put clay pipes in the ground.
Yes.
And then the ground moves, shifts, does different things, and then people dig, and all of a
Right.
sudden they put a house close to it. They didn't even know the pipe was there.
Right.
And
And
then
they've crushed it or,
and it just
fractured
makes a
it.
little small
Yeah.
crack in it, and then a root finds that crack and
Right.
pushes in there and pops that sucker open.
Yep. And
guess
stormwater.
what?
Yep.
Here comes the water. And the root system loves those old clay pipes
yes.
because they will run all the way through that clay pipe and find all the water they need.
Yes. Yes.
And it's pretty amazing. However, it doesn't help our
Oh, right.
wastewater treatment plant because those pipes are really doing a bad thing. Now,
Right.
I think people might remember, and I think it's been even talked about at a few Alderman meetings, with the in situ form that city did a few years back. That helped a lot,
Yes.
but it doesn't take away the problem
Right.
from the infiltration from the older homes.
Right.
It just corrected those sewer lines
Right.
that did
Those
not have to
particular
be
lines.
dug up
Yes.
and saved a lot of money.
Right.
But at the same time, it did not alleviate that infiltration
Right.
of the rainwater.
Right. Yeah. We'll be looking for solutions for that for quite some time to come. So.
Yeah, and I think people remember the smoke tests that were done years ago
Right.
that MRPC and even Archer
Right.
did some of those. It's kind of scary when you see smoke coming out of
Right.
the basement drain. And like, ooh,
Right.
God, it's not supposed to be there. But yeah,
Yeah.
my house is on fire. No,
No.
it's not
It's just
really.
your sewer line
Yeah.
smoking. Yeah.
Yeah. Who's down there?
Right. Right.
But anyway, so again, vote on April 4th, or again, non-excused voting is allowed right now. And again, as Sally mentioned, when you read the ballot issue, it is a little bit confusing, but you do want to vote yes if you want this to pass. Vote no if you don't.
Right.
But again, think of the consequences, and we're
Right.
not trying to scare anybody. This is
No.
just the reality
Right.
of this. Yes means cheaper rates, no means expensive rates.
Right.
It's gonna if you live in the city.
Yes.
And if you don't live in the city, you don't need to worry about it.
As long as you don't have city service.
Well, that's what I mean.
We do have a few.
Ah, well, I
We have
mean,
a
you know what I
few,
mean.
right.
If you aren't
Right.
not on the city services,
Right.
I know you don't need to worry about it,
Right.
but you do need to worry about where this is going in the future. And
Yes.
think about it for your
Yes.
own system, because as we have heard, and I'm sure you've heard it, because especially out coming back, that they're going to start wanting to start monitoring wells
Yes.
and putting a
Yes.
meter on wells and charging you, especially if this, water bill goes through that they
Right.
keep talking about,
Right.
that the United States wanting to control all water. If you use your own well, they're going to meter your water and they're going to charge you for it
Yeah.
on your own well. Can you imagine that?
Well,
but that's what I mean. It's been proposed.
Right, right. And it sounds crazy right now to most folks, but yeah, it's been proposed. In some states, some of the western states are already restricting rainwater. You can't just capture the rainwater coming off your roof.
And the wonderful
not
thing
yours.
is California took away their drought restriction. You can now water your yard. Of course, they got 7 foot of mud in it,
Yeah.
but they got
Right.
all this water. And
Right.
I said, okay, here's the problem with Cal, and we're getting away from this. But they didn't build enough reservoirs, and when they
Right.
did, they kept tapping into the same ones.
Right. Right,
Okay.
the same aquifers.
All right,
and the
so
same,
if I've
yeah.
got a big reservoir and I've got 15 people on it, it's going to last me a long time. But if I got 15 million, it's not going to last
Right.
me very long when everybody takes a shower at one time. You can
Yes.
probably watch that thing just drop.
Right,
So,
Right.
you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Fortunately, here in Salem, we've got wells.
right.
And we've got storage tanks, and we have ample water.
Yes, yes,
Which is wonderful.
yes.
And it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of water tanks, and we're still
Right.
looking, and possibly even another
Yes,
one.
to expand. Yes, that was another grant that we received. We've been very fortunate this
Right.
last kind of 9 months, 6-9 months in the grants that the city has received, all for infrastructure improvements. So yeah, like you said, there's the $5 million for the sewer. There's, and I won't remember all the amounts. I know there's another 50,000 to study our infiltration, so the
for the
leaking.
lead, yeah.
Well, no, for
Infiltration, yes.
right. So like we talked about the manholes and the pipes
Right.
that allow water in. We got one to do the study on the lead service lines for water, and we got one to do a new water well and tower for the city. So we've been very fortunate.
Yeah, that's
now
been
the work
discussed
begins.
for a while. It's
Yes,
just
yes. But now it's happened.
paying
and-
for it. And,
right.
people
Yeah.
need to understand these water, and they think, oh, yeah, just no big deal, just go drill a new well.
Yeah, no.
No, it's not quite
No,
that easy,
no.
and the restrictions are very, very stiff.
Right. And they're
on
getting
doing
worse
this,
every day.
Right?
Yes.
And we even know about even just painting those
Yes.
towers. Once you even get them, you still
Yes.
got to maintain them.
Yes.
And maintenance, what, 200,000 or so or more
Or
to
more.
paint, just paint.
Yeah,
Right.
over
And-
300 was
yeah.
the last quote that I remember seeing.
Well, you're not going to get me in there. To
no,
paint it.
no, I'm not in there. No.
I'm not. That's
No.
but it have to be maintained.
Right.
So
Yes.
you can have all the storage tanks you want,
Right.
but if they're not maintained,
Right. It don't do any good.
pretty soon they're
Yeah.
going to shut that one off,
Right.
and you got a nice well there. It's great, but no
Right, no
storage.
storage.
Tank.
Right.
So anyway, very good. Thank you, Sally.
Absolutely.
I hope we have clarified it just to make it easy. Again, we'll
Right.
repeat it one more time. You vote yes on the bond issue. This is going to be a bond. Did they have
Sewer bond.
have they talked about the length of the payback on that?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I'm,
I know you've hired a company
Right,
to write the
right.
language and
Yes.
stuff. I didn't know if they were going to be a 20-year bond, 15
I'm
or-
anticipating a 20.
Okay.
That's not set in stone.
No,
but,
okay.
but-
So it would be a 20-year
Right.
bond. So you investors out there, you might be looking at
Right.
the bond,
Right.
and then you'd be able to buy that bond, and then you get state
Right.
tax-free income.
you know,
off
and,
that
and
bond.
how long that goes out may be dependent on how much we actually end up bonding for.
Right,
So
that's
if
true.
we're successful in getting other grant funds to reduce that amount, that may change that time frame. So
Very
again,
well-
a lot of unknowns.
Right, very well could.
So-
Okay, so but let's just say you got a bond. We pass the bond issue. We get the grants.
Right.
There's 2 different grants that the city knows of. They're looking for more. Trust me, they will be looking, scouring,
Yes.
going through every single thing and opening every email that
Yes.
says grant that says
Yes.
we can help pay. That will alleviate some of that amount owed, and you could be paying as little as maybe $3 to $6 a month additional in your sewer bill. That's livable. It hurts, but
Right.
it doesn't hurt as much.
Right.
If the city has to go out, if the bond issue passes, but they can't get the grants. So you're talking about $2.7 million that they don't get.
Right.
They'd have to finance that money. Still have to pay the 4.6. It's still part of the deal. Then you're going to have to pay more,
Right.
probably between 8 and 12, somewhere
Right.
between there. And then if the issue does not pass, that's going to be the highest burden.
Right.
Not exactly sure what that price is going to be, but you're going to be looking probably anywhere between $16 and $20
Yeah.
a month more to pay for this. Again,
Yeah.
nothing the city has done. It's nobody's fault. This is, unless you want to blame your legislature's up there in Washington, D.C., I guess, for hiring the EPA. But, I mean,
Right.
somebody's got to
Right.
be, if you're
Right.
going to put the blame on it, put the blame on EPA.
Right.
But anyway, that's where it's all coming from. It's all
Right.
coming from the federal government. It has
Right.
nothing to do locally. All this the board can do, all that the city can do is follow the
Right.
rules
Right.
that are being dictated to them by
Right.
the Department of Natural Resources here in Missouri, which are following the edict put down by EPA.
Right.
And that's it.
Yeah.
So, yes or no, April 4th, yes, less money, no, more money.
Right.
That's all you got to remember.
That's it. Yes.
If you're a city resident, that's all you have to remember.
Yeah.
So, make a choice, though. The choice
Right.
is yours.
Right.
Do we clarify that about as clear as it can be?
I'm not sure how else we could dice that. Yeah.
All right. Sally, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Hopefully we've clarified that for some people that I
Right.
think that they think, well, we don't even have to do this. Yes,
Right.
we do.
Right.
This is not optional. And that's
Right.
every city. It's
Right.
not just Salem.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're all going through this very same thing.
They are.
Even
Yes.
people who just got their systems updated. I think I was
Yeah.
at Lake of the Ozarks here not long ago, and I think Camden just got it all redone.
And now they've got new
and
regulations.
I think it was $32 million for
Yeah.
theirs.
Yeah.
Holy
Yeah.
jiminy, like,
And
what
we're-
are you guys are crazy.
And so this sewer bond is for phase 2 improvements to our
Right.
wastewater
Right.
treatment plant, and we're still paying off the first
Phase
phase.
one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sad part is, there'll be a phase 3 somewhere down the road.
Right.
There will be. We
Right.
all know.
Right.
It'll change.
Yeah. Down the road there will
It'll
be.
change. So anyway, but let's worry about phase 3 20
Right.
years from now, hopefully.
Let's
hope.
hope. Let's hope.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank
Appreciate all you do in this, and I know you've been trying to give people the information on this, and you're probably tired of talking about it. I'm sure you are, but it is a very important
It is.
feature to the success of our city.
you. It is.
It
Absolutely.
really is, and our citizens.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. So very good. Now I'm going to go to the other guy.
Okay.
This guy's going to talk about a 1 cent sales tax increase. Shawn.
All right. Yep.
Why one? I want, because people have asked,
Yes.
Right.
why can't we do a half cent, or why can't we do a quarter cent, or 3/4 cent? Well, you can. You could have.
Right.
Right.
But there's a reason why you're asking for one.
Correct. Yep. So that's the second ballot question on April 4th is, shall the city of Salem, Missouri impose a city sales tax of 1%? And so we started this discussion last year. The first time we talked about this in a finance committee meeting was in October. And at that meeting, we went over different numbers. We looked at a 1/4% increase or a 0.5%, and even 3/4. But when you look at our budget for this current fiscal year that runs from July 2022 to June 2023, and seeing what we budgeted for revenues and our budgeted expenditures and what we're having to transfer from our utility funds to the general fund to help balance the budget, when we was going through those calculations, the 1% increase made the most sense to help be less dependent on a large transfer from the electric fund to the general fund to balance the budget.
So basically, you're not relying on the utility funds, which the city has done for years,
Yes.
to balance their budget. Because if they needed transfers, and even though Salem has been known for very low electric rates for years and years and years, they were able to actually transfer money from the electric fund, even from the water fund at times, to help balance the budget.
Right.
We'll revisit something going back, let's just say 15 years ago. Your Park and Recreation Department had no budget. I mean, it really didn't exist. It was all part of general revenue.
Right.
Your police department is all under general revenue.
Right.
It's not getting its own tax money.
Right.
Say Park and Rec is now. So they are not really
Right.
under the guise of the general budget. They have their own, but still, if they fall short, guess where they have to go back to?
Right.
Right.
Cemetery fund. Okay, it's
Almost entirely out of general fund.
yeah. I mean, there is an endowment there, and you can use the interest.
Right. The interest.
But that interest in the last few years has been pennies
Right.
on the dollar.
Right. Yeah,
and there's
it's
not
better
that
this
many
year.
dollars in
Right.
there,
Right. It's better this year, but even so, I think the last budget numbers we saw was like 16,000 for the year.
Yeah.
Was the
Yep,
interest? I
yeah.
mean, that's not enough to operate.
No,
some
no, no, no,
drainage
no,
stretch.
not even to keep the grass cut out there,
Exactly.
basically.
Right.
So,
Right.
and there's maintenance of roads out there, and of course the digging of the graves, and just general maintenance out there. It
Right.
just takes a lot. So we have a lot of funds, and of course, when people think about the airport board, there's a lot of things the city gets out of the airport. Yes, they get a lot of grants to get work done at the airport, but there's still a match.
Right.
Yes.
Even if it's 10%, there's
Right.
still a match.
Yeah.
Where does that money come from? Comes from general revenue. Yeah, there's a little bit of money that's generated out of the airport.
Yeah.
Since we haven't had any fuel out there, that has been,
That's been
reduced
reduced.
obviously over the past few years. But still, general revenue funds, about 80% of the city. I mean, you've got your utility funds that do their own.
Right.
You've got Park and Rec now that does its own. Where else are you going to go?
Yeah.
Right.
Most of the things that folks think of as true government services are funded through the
general revenue.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And if you look at the city's budget, there's 34 different funds.
That's
and,
what I mean.
And one of the 34 is the general revenue fund, which pays for general municipal services such as
Sure.
public safety and
Right.
public works, your street department and construction crew, and the administration, which includes city administrator, city clerk, and other general operating
Sure.
expenses for the city. And the main revenue source for that fund is the general revenue sales tax, which
Sure.
for that fund we currently collect 1%. The total city sales tax rate for the city is 1.875, with 0.5% going towards capital improvement,
Right.
which is a separate fund, and then the 3/8 sales tax is for
Park
parks,
and Rec.
which is its own fund. And by state statute, we can't transfer funds from those funds to the general fund to balance the budget.
Right. No.
Yeah.
So what you transfer was from your utility receipts to balance the budget. All right. So, but that puts a burden on the utilities. And
Right.
Let's explain to people.
Yeah.
Okay, we had this. Let's talk about the tornado that just went through Louisiana. If that would hit Salem
Oh,
and take down all your utility poles, would you have money right now in reserves to replace that?
We do not. No. So if you
So-
look at our reserves right now, they recommend at least 3 to 5 months worth of operating expenses to be in reserves, and we should have at least 1.5 million in there. And if you look at our budget right now, as of December 31st, we had posted our semi-annual financial statement, and the fund balance for the electric reserves is $164,000.
I'll get you through a week.
Right.
But what I'm saying is this is the problem, and a lot of the reserves got used during COVID. Well, so let's not
right.
beat around the bush. When COVID hit, it affected. We still didn't have $1.5 million
Right,
in reserves,
right.
but it did affect the reserves, and it got them reduced. But right now, we have to start thinking about protecting the assets of the city, and I
Right.
think that's what people forget. Okay, well, you got to have reserves for water and sewer, and you got to have them. You really do.
Yeah.
People think, well, what's going to happen to a water line? Well, I don't know. Get a little small earthquake, and let's see what can happen.
Right.
And you get one of those couple of main water lines break and shatter, you're going to have a major problem.
Yes.
Okay, so you need the reserves.
Yeah.
Sewer's the same way. So you need the reserves. But we don't have a lot of reserves in any of our utilities, do we?
Really, just the water. We have enough reserves,
100,000.
but for the electric, like you
But
said,
still not your 3 months.
no, that's not the truth.
No.
Yeah.
No.
But going back to your point on COVID, how it affected the city, it affected the revenue. During that time, the city didn't do disconnects, so bills were still being sent out. But then some people,
Right.
they're going through tough times,
Yeah.
and some couldn't pay their bills, so we weren't, getting that revenue. Another thing that really hit the electric reserve is the February 2021 code snap.
Sure.
Right
When-
after. Kind of
Right,
the tail end
yeah.
of it.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And that cost the city an additional 1.2 million. We didn't have that in reserves, so that whatever amount was remaining at that time in that fund drained it, left about $19,000, and then the remaining amount that was owed to our supplier, we had to finance that through the state. Luckily, Governor Parsons approved the Missouri Municipal Utility Emergency Loan Program, which allowed cities to put their remaining amount on a loan 0% interest for 5 years. So that's something we're still paying off now.
Yes.
Right. But
But if
when-
another something happens,
Right.
sure.
we're, yeah.
But let's just say, so I want people to understand the electric that the city buys through NPUA, they don't buy it. It comes right out of the account. They don't ask your permission. You guys got enough money to cover this. They just take it.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so when they take it, if you don't have it,
Right.
you better find it.
Yes.
And they don't care where you find it from. It's not their problem. They provided you with this.
Right.
You're going to pay for it.
Right.
And we don't care if it's from wherever you find it in your budget. Now, obviously, it put a big burden on the city. But we want to make people understand that. It's not something that the city writes a check to NPUA.
No.
Oh, we'll get it to you when we have the money.
No.
They don't care.
Yeah.
It comes right out of your account and it goes right to them,
Yeah.
and it's paid. So, meantime, a lot of people like to say, well, I can budget my money pretty well. Those are the kind of things that are happening in today's world. You can't do. Those monies are being withdrawn without your consent or option or anything else. So when you have that happen, it can really tighten down the
Absolutely.
belt buckles for every single department, because if you have to pull money, you suddenly have how much left in general revenue to account for other services.
Right. Right. To cover that.
Right.
And
And this is one of the reasons why we're talking about this, because those kind of funds, they can strap you quickly.
Yeah.
And then we're talking about all these other services. What happens to those services?
Right. And so to help with the electric reserves and to help have a little bit more money in the electric fund for us to be able to have comparable rates to nearby providers is on average, when you look at the city's budget for the last 10 years, on average, there's been a transfer of at least $1 million from electric to general fund.
It used to be a lot more than that.
And so, yeah, at least. And if we're able to pass an additional 1% sales tax, that's less money that we wouldn't have to transfer from electric to general fund to
The
help.
goal is to just reduce that
Right.
totally, right?
Correct,
Just
yeah.
To not have
Well-
to reduce,
Well,
really have to transfer.
to reduce it, but
Yeah, I mean, but not the big goal would be not to have to transfer any. It's going to happen anyway. I mean, it would be nice.
It's common for cities to transfer funds from utilities to the general fund, because if a private utility was to operate in a city, they would pay a
Fee.
franchise tax
Sure.
or a payment in lieu of tax, and that's that way they want to own utility poles. They would pay that to the city, and cities that don't operate their own utilities would put that in their general fund to help provide for basic services.
So maybe I should rephrase that and say, well, you don't want to rely on the utility to be your bank to go to say, okay, we're at the end of the budget year, we're short $58,000. So, hey, Mr. Electric Department, thank you.
right.
And then take that out, and a lot of times that could be they can be taken out of reserves if need be. We don't want
Right.
to do that,
Right.
but it could just be taken out of electric income if there's a nice balance in there too. So, but the bottom line is, the less you have to withdraw from utilities, the more it can be put into reserves.
Exactly.
Save it for a rainy day. Well, we had the rainy day last week.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And really, it does come to that. So the 1 cent was to help alleviate that pressure.
Correct. Yeah. And then earlier, the question was why 1%? And we talked about, we played with the numbers back in the finance committee meeting, and we determined 1% was the most appropriate to rely less on that transfer from electric to general. Plus, by state statute for the general revenue sales tax, the maximum the cities can ask for general revenue purposes is 2%.
Okay.
And that's another reasoning for that.
Okay. So I brought up a question to you about use tax, because I know people always say, well, why don't we just get the use tax in place? And there is a formula. I don't believe it, but the Department of Revenue has a formula. And it would have said that with all these internet purchases and everything else, it had only been $20,000,
It's hard to
a little
believe.
over $20,000 initial income, and I'm not buying that one at all.
No.
And especially when I take a look at like Ava, and they were getting a lot more,
Right.
and I'm thinking, okay, we're more in par with Ava, and I don't know where they got their numbers from. Now you would have to think that there's some logic to it because of the internet sales. They're getting sales tax
Right.
off the internet sales,
Right.
but City of Salem gets nothing. Now city could pass that use tax, and that is still an option for the city to do. It would be additional income,
Correct.
if they did, for those who want to shop online or buy stuff out of state
Right.
and bring it here.
Yeah, and so that's, to me, that's kind of a misnomer that they call it a use tax. What it is it's a tax on sale of goods through the internet. So, yeah, and that's been quite a bit of discussion here
Right.
at the city to talk about passing that tax. But like you said, the best numbers we have are from the Department of Revenue, and they're showing, $20,000 a year for the city, and it's almost not worth putting on the ballot.
Right.
I mean,
No.
by the time you add election expenses and things
Oh,
like
no,
that,
yeah,
it quickly
yeah.
whittles away. It's like, oh, well, so that's an option.
Yeah, I think there needs to be some
more,
examination of
right,
those numbers,
right.
because when because when I got it, I said, seriously? So I went
Right.
on and looked at it, and I looked at some of these numbers, and I
Yeah.
said, this.
Yeah,
I don't know where they're getting those numbers from,
Yeah.
because I know certain people in town that buy nothing but
Right.
everything online,
Right.
right.
and they're not paying for it, and
Right.
they ship it back. And I'm thinking, how many times they have stuff coming to and from,
Yes, right.
you
And there's
know,
no sales
and there's
tax
no
being
sales
collected.
tax,
Yeah.
and so
Right.
that's
Yeah, and some people think of that. They're like, "Oh, a new tax. A use
That's
tax
not a new-
isn't a new tax. It's an existing tax. It's just not charged on goods you buy online."
Right.
If you walk into a store in town, you're paying that tax, and so it really becomes almost an unfair advantage for those online retailers because our local brick and mortar shops that you could walk into, try it on, handle it, see if it's what you really want,
and buy it now.
Right. The cost is going to be a little higher because you're paying the sales tax. And so it does.
Plus,
put
they've
you-
already paid the shipping to bring
right,
it in
to bring
too.
it in. Right, right.
Yeah,
And
so
so it's
you-
not a new tax. It's more leveling the playing field between our brick and mortar
Sure.
stores and those online retailers.
So yeah,
But,
I mean,
but yeah, we
but
knew
that
what
is an
1%
option.
was going
Right.
to generate.
Right.
We
Yeah,
didn't
sure.
know what the use tax would
yeah,
generate. Right.
and you couldn't rely on that to cover
Correct.
what you're trying to cover.
Correct. And
Okay.
Another question I've gotten too was the recreational marijuana sales tax that voters approved back in November as an amendment to the Constitution in Missouri. Cities are allowed to impose up to 3% sales tax on recreational marijuana. And while we started this discussion back in October, we knew what the additional 1% general revenue sales tax could generate for the city, but we did not know if the 3% or the amendment to the Constitution would even pass. Plus, we don't even know how much up to 3% could generate.
Right.
So we felt more comfortable to put this question on the ballot.
Okay. So let's go through the scenario. You guys were able to show, and again, you'll have a town hall meeting again this Thursday.
Correct.
And if people want to see this, then you can lay it all out for them, Shawn, because it really is much more easy to see it visually.
Yes.
Projected over 3 to 5 years, how this can affect the city and the budget. So, will it affect the budget this year? Nope. You won't even see a dime until probably October, and you might see a few pennies come in October. November, you're going to get about a third of what you need. December, maybe a half. And by January, because a lot of businesses pay quarterly,
Yes.
Right.
and as the people understand, well, they get all sales tax money and they get all in. No. See, every business pays different.
Yes.
Some of the larger businesses pay sometimes weekly. Some pay monthly. Some pay quarterly, and some pay one time a year. On their sales tax. It just all depends on where they fall in the structure of their sales tax. So when you start to think about this, even if this would pass on April 4th, the city would not see a penny of sales tax until maybe October,
Right. Yep.
at the earliest,
Right.
and would not get the full amount for almost a full year.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
After October, not a full year from April, October.
Yeah, so this budget year, between now and the end of June, we wouldn't see anything. Next budget
Right.
year, we might get half a year.
Half.
Right.
And so it'd be the following year. So, I mean, that's hard for a lot of folks to kind of conceptualize
Yeah.
how far out that's going to be before we'll see the full impact. So,
Okay.
yeah, we're trying to lay long-term plans. How do we safeguard our city functions?
So let's explain to it what the sales tax does mean. It's not just for City of Salem residents, and I know that you've got some county residents say, "Well, it affects me. I buy a lot of things in Salem." That's true,
Yeah.
but also all the tourists that come through will help pay that sales tax
Exactly.
as well.
So even though this is a ballot question just for the citizens of Salem that get to vote on this, it affects, the county residents and also tourists coming through. So it's more people to help pay, towards, city services.
Hey,
And it makes sense, though. Everybody who drives through town, unless they're staying specifically on the state highways, if they do anything else in town, they're utilizing city services through our streets, through, if they stop in somewhere, it could be our water infrastructure, our electric, through the utilities at that location.
Sure.
So, I mean, they're all benefiting from city services in some fashion. And so it makes some sense that then folks who are driving through would help us to pay that.
Right.
And
Right.
by spreading it out over that, it's a much smaller impact on each individual.
And I think people say, well, my gosh, all we do is raise taxes and tax, and I get it and I feel it, but I look at Salem and I just last year went to Chicago. You think we would be high at what would it be if we passed the sales like 9,375? Is that what it would
currently
be?
the current sales tax rate combined with county and state is
Right.
8.35%.
So it'd be
9.35.
All right, so Chicago is 15.25. Your hotel, just the tourist, you pay another 8%.
In Chicago.
23% sales tax to stay at a motel in Chicago.
Yeah.
You think
Yeah.
ours is high?
Right.
Okay, so and we have a tourism tax as well.
Right.
It's sure not 8%. I can tell you that much. And and I know that generates additional funds that helps. Obviously, some projects that are going on in that support Salem. That help bring people into Salem and helps generate sales tax in Salem.
Right.
Gosh, it just all seems to be a big circle, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
Interesting how it works.
And if you used to look at our sales tax rate, the city's sales tax rate compared to nearby cities, we're the lowest in the area. Our total sales tax rate combined with capital improvements and parks is 1.875%. But cities nearby us, they're at least 2%, or 2.25%, 2.5%. There's even one down Mountain Grove, they're 3%. Two of the cities that is on my presentation I show at town hall meetings and other public meetings, two of those cities, Houston and Mountain Grove, currently collect a full 2% on a general revenue sales tax. And there's actually a couple of these cities, Cuba, Stillville, Bourbon, theirs is going up. The county they're going up April 1st. They just passed a law enforcement sales tax there. So it's not just Salem that's asking for sales tax increases. There's other cities across the state and county.
Didn't Licking just increase theirs?
They
recently?
increased their general revenue sales tax by 0.5% to help fund their law enforcement. And if you look at our general fund, if you look at the expenditure snapshot, what makes up all the expenditures, 39% of our general fund is public safety for the police department. And that's one of, generally for cities, public safety and public works is the top expenses for cities.
Sure. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't do a law enforcement sales tax. You could.
Right.
And
it's a
that's what the
separate-
county actually did to fund the sheriff's department. So that can be done. That's a specific fund, and it can only be used for that purpose.
Correct.
So yes, the city could do that, but right now, and for years, it's always been under general revenue, and it's worked fine. And this sales tax, if passed, would take the pressure off of that as well.
Right.
So you mean that our police department would be well funded, and I'll give Chief Joe Chase a lot of credit. He works well within a very tight budget
He does.
to keep everything down.
Yeah.
So, but all the departments do. It's not just
Right.
one department that's working under tight budgets. They all are. Because we know how the importance is of utilizing the money that we have available. Because right now, if still need to tap into the electric fund, it's still there.
Right.
But you don't want to really do that because those reserves do need to be replenished.
Right. And
You know.
it was a struggle when we constructed this current fiscal year's budget. One of the things that we weren't able to do was to do a cost of living adjustment for our city staff. And with inflation last year exceeding 7.5%, that was real tough on us, and even tougher on city staff. But what this additional 1% sales tax will help us do is be more competitive in our pay, because there's we need to be able to attract qualified employees to come, but we also need to be able to retain our qualified employees. And if you followed, the City of Raleigh's Facebook page here recently, almost every day they're posting that they're needing officers. And if you compare their starting pay to ours, we're much lower.
Yeah,
And that's a struggle.
it is. Yeah, it becomes a real daily struggle for us for some positions.
And as we already pointed out, even with the passage of this 1 cent sales tax, it's not going to help this year's budget. It's not
Right.
really going to help too much next year. It'll help some.
Right.
It'll
Right.
take a little pressure off, but you're not going to see this until the 2024-25 budget.
Right.
Right.
That's when you can really count on the full impact of the 1 cent sales tax.
Right.
And we all know that they're still. We don't want to talk about expansion of the city, and I don't mean
No,
that,
no.
but you know that there's always the expansion of services. Things keep changing. Technology changes. This changes. This
Right.
changes, and there's cost involved with all that,
Right.
and we do know that.
Right.
And I think everybody goes through. We see the cost. Don't try and go buy a car right now, because it's.
Yeah.
My gosh, you could buy 2 houses 10 years ago for the price you're paying for a car. It's crazy. You put yourself in a position of where do you get the money to pay for it?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's very, very similar, and it's not any different for the city.
Right.
We're talking about a digger derrick truck.
Yes.
Remember when we
Yes.
talked about that? And the city, and it was a tough time when the city just
Right.
agreed to do this. You needed the truck. You
Right.
needed the digger derrick right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, they couldn't get you one
Right.
for a year
Right.
or more. It ended up being close to 2.
Yeah.
And you had to go lease one. And of course, you lease it at a premium.
Right.
Because
Because
you
you
bring
need it right
you
now.
need it right
Right.
now.
Right.
You've
Yes.
got to have it.
Right.
But how many times in the last 2 to 3 years with COVID has there been supply issues
Yes.
with the city trying to get this? You can't even get bids on stuff because nobody will guarantee the bid
Right.
Right.
because they don't know if they can get it.
Right.
Yes. I know one of the big issues we've had over the past year has been streetlights. Streetlights being out. Well, they've been on order. We just don't have them. We can't get them to go replace.
And
so
some of the
it's-
older streetlights we have, they're not making them
Right,
anymore.
right.
So either we have to go change the heads out and put in the new LED
if
lights.
we can get the new heads.
If we get not, that's what I was going next.
Yeah.
If they're available, to change out the lights.
Right.
And see, it's getting better, but
Right.
it's still not back to normal.
Yeah, we're not out of the woods yet.
And these are some of the things that the 1 cent sales tax, instead of sitting there saying, where are we going to get the money,
Right.
would be a every month flow into the city coffers
Right.
to help.
Right.
Okay. So 1 cent sales tax, as Shawn's pointing out, not going to see any impact this year. Not really going to see a big impact next year. But 2 years down the road, you would start to see that.
And I
And then the alderman can actually start to say, okay, let's see what we can do with these electric reserves, water and sewer
Right.
reserves,
Right.
and see if we can allocate or intentionally
Right.
try and set aside 10% of our income off electric and stick it in
Right.
there. Because right now you can't do that.
Right. Well, and I think the other thing to keep in mind, this additional 1% sales tax will not put us at a place, even 2 years down the line, where we have extra money.
Oh, right. No, no.
It's to maintain what we have now,
Right.
the services we're providing, the things that we're doing in our community. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. It's easy to, oh my gosh, one more tax increase, one more. But if you think about what types of services do we want in our community? Do you know what I mean? Do we want less? That's not what I hear from the public. They never want less. And so this is just to allow us to maintain the services we're providing now. It's not extra.
Right.
Well,
And
so
that's an important piece.
so let's put a lot of street department also kind of falls under
Yes.
general revenue.
They
Right.
do.
And I just want to point this out because I had a nice conversation with Mark about this, talking about getting asphalt in. How many of the streets today that you go on Salem, and Salem's done a pretty good job maintaining most of their roads. I will give them a lot of credit. They really have. They've tried different things to save money, chip and
Right.
seal. We've tried, there was another system we tried. Didn't work out so well. Mark said, he goes, look, some of these roads, we can't do anything but asphalt them. We
Right.
just have to use asphalt. Okay, so if you're on one of those roads that you drive down and you feel like you're on a railroad track, okay, they haven't been able to pave these roads because they didn't have the money.
Right.
Right.
Literally, the street department did not have enough money to go buy what they needed to because, first off, if they were even around, which they weren't, the cost of asphalt was absorbent. and it's still going to be high.
Right.
Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But where was the city going to get the money?
Right.
They couldn't.
Right.
So do you go back and chip and seal it? Well, you don't take the problem out of the road.
Right.
It's still there. Chip and seal throws that little half-inch, quarter-inch on top, and okay, it
Right.
looks pretty, but it still drives like crazy.
Right.
You know.
Yes.
So you until you go and actually fix the road, get a new layer on it, 2 to 4 inches is always recommended.
Right.
Well, where's that going to come from? It has to come from the general revenue fund.
Right.
And if you don't have any money there, you can't do it.
Right.
So as our roads right now are still okay, what's they going to be another 3 to 5 years?
Right.
Right.
And right now and people are seeing a few potholes come up.
Right.
I get it. That's everywhere.
Right.
Right. But the asphalt plants have also, for this year, have just opened up.
Just opened up.
So it's-
And we actually have some close.
Yes. Yes.
You know, I know that they're paving Route O, so Route O, that means
Right.
West Brothers, they're here, they're close, and I know there's another couple that have opened up
Right.
somewhere close. So the opportunity to get it
Right.
is here
If we have the funds.
if we have the
Right.
funds. That kind of is the key ingredient, isn't
A little
it?
bit.
If we have the funds.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of times people say, well, you know, if I go look at the budget, they go look at the city budget, they see in their street department, well, there's still $135,000 there. We need to go pave some streets. That's probably 4 blocks, maybe,
That.
maybe.
And it doesn't account for when the water line breaks and we got to go dig up the middle of a street and then we've got to repair the street.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's not part of the planned improving the street. It's these unexpected. We go back to reserve accounts.
Exactly.
You know, why do we need to fund those? Because when these unexpected things happen, and it's, you know, somebody reminded me again the other day that it's not when, it's, or I mean, it's not if, it's when.
Right.
yeah.
It's going
Sure.
to happen. We better be prepared.
Right.
You know, a lot of people, and you hear it, and I know you hear it too. Why do we go pave the streets? As soon as we do, somebody has to go and tear it up for a new water line or a broken water line. And I know in years past, they've actually gone and they have looked at every water line on that road, and they're saying they're all good, they're all good, they're all good, they're all good. They've tested them, they looked them, take the camera through them, they checked
Right.
them.
And as soon as
Doesn't
you-
mean the next winter you're not going to have one break.
Right.
Right. Yeah, there's no
It's-
way to predict that 100%.
It just
yeah.
it can happen, and so you can't just sit there and say, "Well, you guys shouldn't have paved that road." Well, hindsight's always 20/20.
Right.
But where were you when we made a decision to pave it? I didn't hear you complaining
Right. Right.
until
Or saying,
now.
Oh, wait up a minute.
Yeah, you know, wait a minute. I know that water line's bad. You know, it's kind of like MoDOT right now with the water leak that we have on Route J.
Right.
That's only been leaking for 2 months, but they have to come. City
Right.
can fix the leak, but they'd have to shut the road down. They can't.
Right.
MoDOT
Has
has
to,
to make
yes.
that decision. So it's getting worse and worse and worse. And I brought that up to Mark. I said, what are you going to do with that leak there? He said, I've called MoDOT. We can't do anything because you're going to shut the road down.
Right.
And
Yeah.
they have to do it.
Right.
So until MoDOT decides to come out. So again, your hands are tied what the city water department can do because of MoDOT.
Right.
And these are all things that
Right.
people sometimes don't see it.
Right. They don't understand those,
Right.
those restrictions and connections.
You know, now if the water was just coming out of a cap on top, okay, well, you know, city can go in there and find out what the problem is there. But if it's coming out of the road,
Right.
you know, right through the pavement, like, I don't know what we're
Yeah.
gonna do about this one.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I think we got a little issue here. So here, what's the ballot language for the 1 cent sales tax? Do you want to read that so people
It's
can hear it?
shall the city of Salem, Missouri, impose a city sales tax of 1%. That's the
Pretty easy.
Yeah, pretty straightforward.
Yes means it passes. No means it doesn't pass. And if you want to continue to see improvement in the city, now again, people say, well, and you know it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen. You know it's going to happen. Everybody in this building knows it's going to happen. Let's just say it passes April 4th, and they expect those repairs done by 5th.
Yes.
April 5th. Okay, I passed the sales tax.
What are you doing,
okay,
city?
let's get those
Yeah.
streets paid, and let's get those new lights put up, because now we've got the money. No.
Yeah.
It's not the way it works, guys. And so, yeah, this is actually look long term. If you've got kids, look at them.
Yes.
Yeah, and this, this question is really a question that the citizens of Salem can help us answer how we move forward as a city.
Right.
What level of services are you willing to pay for? Because that's what the city of Salem is. It's a large service organization that provides roads and utilities and public safety based upon the value in which people is willing to pay to support those endeavors. So the citizens will be helping us identify how they want to move the city
Right.
to move forward.
Right. Yeah, it really does come down to a question of what are the services you value and what value do you put on those? So,
And there's, the city, we have information on both the sales tax and the sewer bond on the city's website.
Yes.
Under the website's salemmo.com, and there's a projects page, and there's a 12.5-minute video, presented on the sales tax, and there's also some slides on the sewer bond.
Right.
So there's information out there. We, encourage you to go educate yourselves, be
Town
informed.
hall meeting Thursday,
Right.
6:30 to 8
Yeah,
at
right.
the old City Hall auditorium, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Somebody asked me about council chambers. I said, I think it's in the old City Hall
Correct.
auditorium.
It is in the auditorium.
Or what do we call it? Civic Center now? What do we call it? Theaters? I don't even know what we call it anymore. Old City Hall auditorium
There
works
you
for
go.
me. I
Yes.
think it's
Yes.
kind of like still the Armory. It doesn't matter. It's still
Right.
the old City Hall auditorium.
Right.
Head on down there. They'll have all this information available. The questions that you have can be answered. And I know at the last town hall meeting we actually had Archer there, and they talked a little bit about the improvements downtown. And I'm going to bring up one thing. We had a question at one of the utility committee meetings about why the city goes and gets grants, and I just want to touch on this. And I think a lot of people say, well, I pay my taxes and I don't see anything getting done. Those taxes you pay go to those grants as well. So why wouldn't you want your city to apply for money you're actually paying to go to some other city? If we don't ask for it, we don't get it.
Right.
So to get those grants that help pay for some of this, that's part of your money too. So think about it that way, and not think about, well, we keep asking for these grants and we have a match. Okay, so let's just say this. We have a $1 million project and we have to pay 10%. If you have a $1 million project, you can get done for $100,000. Would you do it? Would you buy $1 million? If you had $1 million home that you're going to build and you could pay $100,000 for it, would you do it?
Absolutely. And I think the average person would too when they understand that.
Yeah. So, I wanted to bring this out. It's not that the city's out looking to go spend $100,000
Right.
and get nothing for it.
Right.
It's they go out to get the $100,000 to get the additional $900,000.
Right. It's leveraging your money and getting the best bang for your buck.
Right.
Exactly,
Yeah.
to improve
Right.
the situation that we have without you having to pay that out of your pockets.
Right. And here's the other kicker that I think a lot of folks
Directly,
don't
I
understand.
should say,
Right,
yeah.
right. And you've already paid for it.
Right.
But I think a lot of folks don't understand also that, so if we're not, if the city of Salem, if we're not applying for these grants, okay, right, then correct, we don't have to provide a match, we're not, we can use that money for other things, right? Except that when we don't apply, I guarantee the next town down the road is applying, and then in a couple years you're going to be coming back to the city of Salem saying, why aren't you doing this? This town just did this major upgrade to their downtown, or they just did this beautification project, or whatever it is. Why aren't you doing this, city of Salem? Well, because you didn't want us applying for grants.
Right.
That's the
Yeah.
the opposite side of that.
So, and I know people say, well, downtown's dead. No, downtown is not dead.
No.
It's only, I won't say it's always transforming.
Right.
Because you have bigger businesses that are located outside downtown. Well, when downtown had Dollar General, they were down there. They used to have shoe stores and different things of that
Right.
nature. Okay, downtown was it. Then when people started to move out to other areas, obviously downtown's not going to have the same foot traffic that it
Right.
did when those businesses were there.
Right.
I get that. However, you can change the impact of what your downtown is, because if you've got a vibrant downtown, it helps the entire city.
It does.
So, do you want, going back to what Sally's saying, so let's just say it's $1 million project, and I know it's $500,000, but
Right.
okay, so that's a $500,000 grant. City has to pay 20%, so it's still going to be $100,000. If you can go replace all those sidewalks, get all those old poles down,
Right.
change out your lighting, and make it very attractive, fix the curbing to make it all the same height, and allow better water treatment, better sewers, open things
Right.
up. Gosh, you'd have new sidewalks downtown instead of tripping over the old cracked ones and the unlevel ones and the things you got a problem with. Gee, I don't know. I don't know if I want to invest my
Right.
money to make that happen. But sooner or later, guess what has to happen? You're going to have to replace those sidewalks anyway.
Right.
You're going to have to replace that lighting anyway
Yes.
because you can't get the lights anymore.
Right. Right.
Are we not nipping this ahead of time?
Yeah.
And utilizing that money the city has to make that happen. I mean, I look at it that way. We had to do things with the pool when I was on the park
Right.
board. We had to do things with the pool. Yeah, we had to pay for it. Now they have LWCF grants that they'll pay for pools. They wouldn't do it then,
Right.
but they're doing it now.
Right.
Okay, all right. So our citizens didn't get the benefit of that money. We asked, we tried, we
Right.
tried everything we
Right.
could to get a grant, but we had a service to provide to our citizens
Right.
that came first.
Right.
The city, well, bit the bullet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Park and Rec said, yeah, we have to do this. And with the sales tax that we had, benefited by the people who
Right.
approved that sales tax. For without it, that
Right.
pool would never have been done and would have been shut down for good.
Right.
Yeah.
So because of the sales tax and because we did, well, I won't say some unique financing, we did the,
Right.
certificates of participation.
Right.
We were able to get it done to where the Park and Rec sales tax would pay for
Correct.
that
Yes.
financing.
Right.
And in doing so, it also is allowed to give the people of Salem a very nice pool.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Billy's Playground, an enhanced playground right next to Billy's, and better fields. All this, all because we didn't sit back and wait for it to happen because the
Right.
city had already passed the sales tax.
Right.
Had they not passed that sales tax,
Right. We wouldn't
again, you
have-
don't look to the future,
Yes.
you're going to lose those services.
Right.
It's just not
Right.
going to be there. Same thing's going to happen with this 1 cent sales tax. If we don't look to the future, and I'm not telling anybody how to vote. I'm just saying that I was actually part of that, and had that sales tax not passed, we could not have done what we did to that pool.
Right.
And there was a lot of conversation at that time. City administrator, myself, the park board, and contractors. How are we going to get this done? It was not an easy decision, and I commend the park board on well, they had put their foot out pretty far.
Right.
You
And
know,
sometimes you have to, though. Like you
Right.
said, to look towards the future. What do we want our community to be?
Right.
exactly. So where would we be if that city park, we
Right.
didn't put in Billy's Playground, we didn't put the splash pad in, we didn't enhance the playground area or the new pool
Right.
or fix the tennis courts?
Yeah.
I mean, you think about that city park. Now we got the frisbee golf back again. So,
Yeah.
You've got a lot of positives that came out of one thing, a park and rec sales
One-
Yes.
tax.
A 3/8 cent.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I'll add a little bit different perspective. So I moved back to the area about just over 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago. When I was looking at Salem, so before I had, made the decision about taking the job as economic development director at that time, I was looking at Salem, and most folks who are looking at making a major move, they're going to research the community.
They
Where am
are.
I going, and what am I getting into? I mean, really, those are questions you want to check out before you just relocate halfway across the country there. One of the things that impressed me the most was the fact that the city had, just a few years prior, passed that park and rec tax and had invested in the parks and the pool, and that they valued those things. They become those quality of life assets in a community. And without those, then what do we have?
Right.
Yeah. Well,
Do you know what I mean? We
Yeah.
have a blank space with a dead pool. And, if you want to do something like that, you got to go up to Rolla. Right?
Wow.
That's the answer.
Sure. Yeah. And
I mean, it creates a more vibrant community to be part of.
Right.
instead of a living community, it becomes a dying
Yes,
community. So,
exactly.
and this is the very same thing we're talking about here. So if you want your community to continue to move forward,
Right.
that choice is yours. Look at the sales tax. It will take the pressure off the utility funds.
Right.
And to be honest with you, nobody wants to pay more in electric,
No.
water usage, and sewer. We don't want to do it.
No.
Right.
We do it because part of the way we live, and we all know that. But with an additional 1 cent sales tax, I mean, you just don't realize the impact that actually has, and it's not all out of your pocket. You're sharing it with everybody
Right.
else.
Right.
One of the questions I've gotten before is, how much does that cost me? What does the additional 1% sales tax cost on your everyday purchases? And so if you spend $100, $1 of that will go towards the city. $10, when you spend $10, 10 cents will go towards the city. And when you buy a soda for $2 from the local convenience store, 2 pennies will go towards the city
Yeah.
from that additional
You know,
1%
and I
sales
like to think
tax.
about, you talk about sharing that cost.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about tourists, right? They help us pay it. Well, you think about someone who's coming down, and I'm just going to throw some random things out there, but so you got a family coming down from St. Louis, because it happens all summer long.
Oh, yeah.
Coming down from St. Louis through Salem on their way to Current River, right? So they stop at one of our grocery stores and they fill their cooler when they get here, because you don't want to pack that all the way from St. Louis,
Well,
right?
no.
And so you get here, you buy
More
some
expensive there anyway.
you buy some ice, you pack your cooler with some drinks, some lunch stuff. You stop, you fill up with gas here in Salem. You do all of that. Say you spend $100, just and easy to do. Fill up with gas, pack your cooler, yeah, those kind of things. Maybe get the sunscreen you forgot at home, that kind of stuff, you know.
Hey, all
Very
the incidentals.
realistic. And so they spend $100, and so they'll spend $1 extra on the sales tax. That's the impact it'll have. $1 extra that will go to the city to help us fund our services. You know, and so that's something to keep in mind. That's a very realistic example.
Right.
It is. Now, the question was brought to you, I believe, at a town hall meeting about would that 1 cent sales tax be attached to the utilities?
No,
And it's not.
correct. We have
Okay.
researched it, and
Right.
it is not.
It is not. So somebody asked that question,
Right.
and I thought, I know that was brought up, so I'm
Right.
going to get that addressed right now.
Right.
No, that's not attached to utilities for the city of Salem.
That is
So,
correct.
very good. All right, so guys, thank you very much. We
you.
only talked an hour and a half. Well, I wanted to get as much detail in it and explain to people the impact of what these are.
Yes.
Again, the sewer bond issue, you vote yes, you're going to get an increase in sewer rates no matter what happens.
Right.
All right. So
Right.
here's your options. You vote yes, the city can get grants. It could be $3 to $6. You
Right.
vote yes, they can't get the grants. Okay, maybe a little bit more,
Right.
6 to 8, maybe 10. If you don't do anything and it doesn't pass, you're looking almost double that. Okay, almost double, depending upon what the financing rates will be
Right.
at that time. And we all know the Fed just keeps jacking the rates up. So if
Right.
they keep raising the rates, the financing rates are going to go up no matter
Our
what you
final
do.
cost will be
Final
higher.
costs are going to be
Yes.
higher. So that is your choice. Again, you can vote right now. There's a no excuse absentee ballot. You can go to the courthouse, go to the clerk's office. They'll let you vote right now. Wait till April 4th. Go to your polling location, 6 in the morning till 7 at night. Virtually all Salem people will vote
Right.
either in Spring Creek
Right.
East or Spring Creek West. That makes it pretty simple.
Right.
You know, now the 1 cent sales tax, if you don't vote for it, okay, the city will have to pull more funds out of their utility department, which means if need be, that the rates could go higher to keep the city fluid. I'm just
Yeah.
being
Right.
realistic,
Right,
right?
right.
If it doesn't pass. If it does pass, then, okay, that's an additional 1 cent tax. We're maxed out on a sales tax for municipality.
For general revenue.
For general
Right.
revenue. Okay, yeah, not law enforcement or anything else.
Right.
Those would be special taxes, okay?
Yeah.
But for general revenue, we're maxed out there. So the city would have the amount that they have. It will lessen the burden off of the utilities. It'll provide, but won't provide any money for basically a year and a half, full amount of money
Right.
for a year and a half. We'll start seeing some trickle in October, a little more in November, a little bit more in December, and then by January, you'll start to see an amount of probably about 5/8 of what you would get the next January. Really works kind of weird. Watched it with the county. I'm thinking, where are they getting these numbers?
Right. Yeah.
Excuse me. So again, the choice is yours.
Right.
April 4th or now. Vote either yes or no. If you've got children in the community and you want it to be better, you need to look forward. And if but that's your choice.
Right.
Again, we're not telling you how to vote, but do get out and vote.
Yes, please do.
And if you don't vote, it's like a no vote. It really
Right,
is. If you
right,
don't vote, it's like a
right.
no vote.
Right.
So if you do vote, you have an opportunity to voice your opinion one way or another.
That's right. Yep. It's the most effective way to voice your opinion.
And it is. And the thing is, we're Americans. We earn this right to vote.
Yes.
So don't let it just slip by.
Right. These
Vote.
are very important issues that like you put it, and they will dictate the future of our community.
Yeah, they have
Well-
real consequences, depending on the vote.
Yes.
So all I can say is we're thankful for you guys coming in. We just want to explain, try and get down home,
Yes.
layman's terms, and see what the impacts were. And I know how important that 3/8 cent sales tax was for Park and Rec. I know when that first went out there, I said that should have been a countywide tax
Gotcha.
because
Right. It's
there's a
not
lot of
just
people in the
Salem
county that
residents.
utilize
Yes.
the city services. As a matter of
Yes.
fact, about
The pool.
98% of them.
Yep. Yeah.
You know, when they want to, when their kids play city ball
Yes.
leagues and
Yes.
soccer and pool and
Yeah. All of
use
rec
the
leagues.
fields for softball and everything else, and they're kind of getting off with a real good deal. But not complaining. The 3/8 cents sales tax did a lot for Park and Rec. Had it not passed, think about that. If it had not passed, the services you have right now, when you go to that city park, and we get tons of compliments on our city
Yes.
park, you would not have that park there. Basically, you'd have an old metal frame for your swings. You'd have, tennis courts would probably be kind of, the fencing would be pretty nasty. And,
Right.
we know we've still got some issues on the one end where it tends to kind of sink a little bit. None of that would ever be repaired.
Right. Right.
It just would. And your
Yeah.
pool would be closed.
Yes.
Had not been
Yeah. The
for
park
that.
would not be the gathering place it is today.
Right. And also, and we're still hoping for soccer fields somewhere down the
Right.
road. That's still hoping. But obviously, they couldn't do it because the time COVID hit,
Right.
and with the city's financial situation.
Right.
I think people are unaware that you have to pay for everything first. You get your money back later.
Yes. Yes.
Well, if you don't have the money to pay for it, you can't really
Yes.
do the work
Right.
and sit there and say, I promise to pay you. Once we get the money,
Right.
yeah, sure you will.
Yeah.
And
that is a question that's come up on the grants for like the sewer project and things. Well, the city already has the money. No, we've been awarded the money. We don't have it. We don't get it until we've already paid the expense. And then as we incur the expenses, then we can apply for reimbursement of those
Right.
costs. But we have to foot it up front.
Right.
And
So
Sally,
it's
to be
a-
honest with you, that money, by the time you pay it, so it leaves your account,
Right.
and then you apply with the reimbursement, it may be 60 to 90 days.
It could easily
or
be that.
more.
Yeah.
Because the government doesn't work expeditiously to get your money back to you. It's amazing. They'll award you the money. It sure
Right.
takes a long time to get it. But
Right.
I'm just saying, if
kind
you
of
don't,
indicative of the sales tax if it passes.
Sure.
It'll be a year and a half, 2 years
Sure.
before we see the full impact.
Right.
Of that. Yes.
but
So, yeah.
but that money's out of your account today.
Right,
And
yes.
if the coffers are low, you just
Right.
can't do it.
Yeah. If you don't have the
You
cash
know,
flow
yeah,
to make it happen.
you got it.
Yes.
You got to stay in the black on the cash flow because
right.
you just never know day to day what's
Right.
going to happen. I mean, look
Yes.
at last week. We had all that rain. We're fortunate, and I wanted to, by the way, not do anything with sales tax and stuff, but a good compliment on the city crews of keeping the ditches cleaned out. Had those ditches not been cleaned out
yeah.
as well as they have, you'd have had some problems with all that rain.
Right.
That water.
Yeah.
Okay. I can
It'll go
honestly,
somewhere.
it'll go
Yes.
somewhere. It'll back up real fast
Yes.
too.
Yeah.
So I know where I live. It has flooded before, and that water was about 4 inches from the top, but it was flowing. And as long as it can keep flowing downriver, we're good. Down creek, downstream, whatever it is, we're good to go. I do know that down on 19, that little Spring Creek got over top of that second bridge on the low side. Yeah, and there were a lot of twigs and stuff.
Right.
When I actually saw it my time, it was about a half inch below it. It was you could see just a little daylight, but not much, and it wasn't going to take much more rain.
Right.
That if that all backs up,
Oh, yeah.
that's going to be in the city, and then you got a problem.
Yeah.
And we've seen that before. I wanted to get a compliment because I don't know if the street department's doing that. I think it is, but that's really been a big benefit. And we all know that anymore, even with the bigger locations we have, like with Walmart and things of that nature, when you put that much asphalt out there, you got runoff water that increases
Yes.
tenfold every single time you do that because
Yes.
it can't be absorbed in the ground.
Right.
So it's going to run somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, and if anybody wants to see a whole bunch of water in a big place, go over there by Terrell's right there
Oh,
by
yes.
B&B, where all that comes into one location. You want to see it churning
Yes.
when that rain was hitting. I mean, you could just watch that. You wouldn't want to be in it.
No.
Right.
No.
That's some water pressure coming in there from under streets and right there from under businesses and everything, and it all goes there, and it goes down one little creek.
Right.
And it's amazing how much water
The volumes. Yeah.
can go in there and how it churns up. So, again, I want a
will
personal
pass it
thank
on.
you
I
to
will
the
pass
street
it on.
department because that's amazing that we didn't have any backups and anybody really have too much water in their backyards. I know there's probably a few that had
Right.
some, but all it takes is somebody losing a trash can, and with all the wind
Right.
we've had
Right.
blowing in there and then
It's
getting
very
underneath the
easy.
bridge and
Yes.
backing everything up.
Right.
Doesn't take much.
No,
So
it
again, a
doesn't.
tip of my cap to them. A tip of my cap to Sally and Shawn for coming in. We've
Thank you
taken a
for
lot
having
of
us.
time to do this, but I thought it was an issue that was very important. There is a Board of Alderman meeting tonight, and it is open to the public at 6 o'clock, and it is at Council Chambers of City
Correct.
Hall, so not at
Correct.
not the auditorium. Thursday night, 6:30 to 8, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and it's just going to be on the sales tax issue and
sewer
on
bond.
the bond issue for the sewer. If you've got questions, it's a great time to go get them asked. As Shawn said, there's information on the
On the
salemo.com website.
Yes.
Go check that out. And we really, really want to thank you guys for coming in and spending some time. This affects our city big time. So make your vote count one way or the other. Make your vote count. That's all we can ask.
Thank you, Stan.
Yep, thank you
Guys,
for the
thanks so much
opportunity.
for coming in. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks.